Hey guys, so I'm really excited to be starting this YouTube channel again. I felt like it's just been forever since I've sat down and filmed something for you guys, and now that I am a new grad nurse, I feel like I have so much more content to cover for you and share on my YouTube channel, so I'm really excited about that. I wanted to make this video on my experience with the NCLEX because I feel like every nursing student is like their end goal is to pass the NCLEX, and that's kind of what they drill when you are studying in nursing school, is that at the end of the day the major exam you'll all take is the NCLEX. So I wanted to share a little bit about what I did, how I prepared, and my experience with the NCLEX overall. So I did pass the NCLEX. I passed, I believe, on August 30. I took it, I think, August 31st, and I found out that I passed on September 2nd or 3rd. I think September 3rd. So I took it August 31st. I graduated from my nursing program August 3rd. So I kind of consistently studied previous to my graduation from my nursing program, but it wasn't like many hours a day routinely. It would just be like a couple practice questions here and there. It wasn't anything like hardcore. And then after I graduated from my nursing program, I realized like, oh, okay, now we have to really start getting into our routine and everything. So I set up a schedule for myself. Daniel basically worked Monday through Friday, and he was off on the weekends. So I kind of wanted to mimic a schedule similar to his so that we could spend at least the weekends together. So I made a schedule for myself where I would study Monday through Friday from about 10 to 3. So I would study anywhere from like 3 to 5 hours a day, every single day, Monday through Friday. And I did this until August 30th. So yes, I did study the day before the NCLEX, and I'll tell you how it helped me, because I felt like it did really help me. So the study tool that I used was UWorld. My school was a huge advocate for Kaplan, and I personally didn't like Kaplan. I just felt like the questions were worded really confusingly, and on top of that, I felt like the questions were kind of outdated. Again, I felt like the questions were really confusing. They were worded kind of really awkwardly sometimes. And also, I felt that the rationales that Kaplan gave were kind of really I don't even know how to explain it. Like, they kind of expect you to know like what something is. So they give you just a one-sentence rationale, thinking that you already have the background knowledge for everything else. So I personally didn't like that. I did realize that a lot of my classmates who stuck to Kaplan did pass, but they passed in having to take more questions. So I had a friend who I think ended up having 121 questions on her NCLEX, who solely studied off of Kaplan, whereas a lot of my friends who used UWorld passed in 75. So that's just kind of a personal analyzation that I made. But again, like, some of you might have passed in 75 just using Kaplan, so it differs per person. I personally used UWorld. I loved it. I set a schedule for myself. I would review material. What I do recommend is getting some sort of review book. I used the Kaplan Comprehensive book, and that was really helpful. Our school gave that to us, so it just gives you a summary of many different topics. And allows you to know the major things. So for instance, if you're bad at cardiac system, they have like a separate category for the cardiac system and gives you a quick review of the major things you need to know for the NCLEX. So I used that book, and every morning I would give myself a subject to study, whether it was the GI system or the cardiac system or adult health, emergent health, whatever it may be. I gave myself a section to study. And then after I studied it, I would review my notes one more time that I made using the book, and I highly, highly recommend handwriting notes, and I'll tell you why in just a second. And then I would move on to doing UWorld practice questions. So UWorld gives you a maximum limit, so you can only do 75 questions per exam that you make. So I would do 75 questions a day, sometimes even more, sometimes a little less, and I would remediate those questions on the spot. And this is really important because the remediation will really engrave that information in your head so that you remember it for the next time they give you a similar question. So I hand wrote everything. I had a notebook to myself. I hand wrote all my notes that I took from the Kaplan comprehensive book, and I also wrote notes from the UWorld questions that I was remediating. So if I didn't know a subject, or if I didn't know that, if they had given me a select all that apply question and I didn't know some of those choices were relevant to that topic, I would write it down so that I would know. So that's what I did. And handwriting is really helpful because rather than typing up notes, if you handwrite it, it allows your brain to kind of absorb that information a lot better. And so you recognize the information and kind of understand it more, and it sticks in your brain a lot better than typing it. You can type something mindlessly, but when you're writing it, you're kind of reading through it while you're writing it. It takes a little bit more time to write than type. So I personally found it really helpful just to write out my notes. So that's what I did every day, Monday through Friday, until August 30th. So on August 30th, so this was the day before my NCLEX, I was thinking, I've read a lot of people telling me like, don't study before the NCLEX. If you don't know it by then you don't know it at all. And it's true, right? Like if you don't know something by the day before your NCLEX, then are you really going to know it? If you hadn't known it for however many long. However, I will say that reviewing kind of helped me relieve some of that anxiety, because I felt like if I didn't study the day before the NCLEX, I would be more anxious because I would feel like I missed out on a day where I could have just reviewed something and maybe gained something from that review. So I did review, I didn't do any more practice questions. That I would highly suggest you not to do any more practice questions the day before or even 2 days before your exam, because you're only going to freak yourself out if you're not getting the same scores that you usually get, or you're not getting a high enough score before the exam. You're only going to freak yourself out and you're going to think like, am I really ready for it? So I would suggest that you just don't even do practice questions anymore. However, what I did was, like I said before, I had handwritten notes that contained all the information that I had reviewed from that comprehensive book, plus the remediation that I did from UWorld. So I reviewed that. Plus lab levels. And I think I studied like 6 hours that day, the day before my NCLEX, but I felt so prepared, guys. Like, I felt like if I did this much, if I studied a month and did all of this and did everything right and I still didn't pass, then there's something wrong with me. Like, I just felt so prepared. And I felt like even if I maybe didn't use the comprehensive book and just stuck to UWorld and kind of reviewed just that material and remediated just that, I still would have done really well, because I felt like UWorld really prepared me for the NCLEX. So I was reading all these forums about like, is UWorld harder than the NCLEX? Like, you know, what any typical person would do before a big exam. You search up everything and anything on the web, and that could be a good thing or a bad thing. For me, I think it was kind of a little bit of both. But a lot of people said like, oh, UWorld's actually harder than the NCLEX, which makes sense because they need to over prepare you so that when you take the NCLEX, you think it's like the easiest thing ever. For me, when on my day of the NCLEX, I was the last person to go into the testing room. So you sign in, everything, like you give them your ID, everything like that. And then they take you to the back where the rooms are, and then you start testing. So I was the last person to go in. I had to use the bathroom like right before they called people into the room. I went to the bathroom, I come back, none of the people are there that are there to take the NCLEX, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like of course this would happen to me. So I was one of the last people to go in to take the test, and I was the first person to come out. So I feel like, I don't know if that's like a good thing or a bad thing, but I did take 75 questions, I think in like